Wow. Erik Ten Hag has been sacked by Manchester United. How are you guys feeling? I think we've been he's been a dead man walking for a long, long time. And I think the fan base has been pretty impressive in terms of how they've looked to give him opportunity after opportunity. But INEOS have made a decision. And I get it. Look, I'll tell you what, we're here to do the Premier League video. And we were talking about it kind of yesterday. What do you think he could go? And the reason I thought he could go was, from the basic reason that the wins have not been coming. The performances have been okay if you're really, really pushing at being as optimistic as possible. But I think the West Ham game was a really, really interesting one because West Ham have been blown away by top teams. Absolutely blown away. You look at the Chelsea game, for example, the Tottenham game. Teams that play expansive, attractive football. And Manchester United obviously want to be in that similar realm. Now, the game itself, they were actually kind of unfortunate. Delot misses a gilt-edged chance. The penalty is naughty, to say the least. But the bigger problem here is the fact that you're not able to get the job done against a West Ham team that's kind of on his knees right now. Now, again, there are sort of some broader rules in football sometimes where you kind of go, West Ham's always a tricky game for Man United. Whenever I see that in the fixture list, I always feel like that is a tricky game. But that said, Erik Ten Hag has been given a really good run at it. And I think what's difficult here is that, are you going to think that there's going to be any kind of real huge change with Ruud van Nistelrooy coming in? We'll talk about that in a second. But I think what has got Erik Ten Hag at the end of all of this is the fact that they've spent a solid amount of money on players that I think I was looking at it, and the squad was sort of, I think 9 of 21 of the players that have come in have played for either Ajax or are Dutch. Now that means that Erik Ten Hag does have his fingerprints on this team. And yes, injuries was a huge caveat last season. And so I thought it was the right call to give him that time. I really did. But this isn't good enough. If you think about the worst starts to a season, last season, right up there. This season, even worse. There has to be progression. The great Ian Holloway once said, if you want to get to where you want to be, each season, all you've got to do is get more points than the previous season. Now, I guess you've got to let him have the whole season for that to come to fruition. But Manchester United have not been really going forward. Teams are playing better football, better brand of football, which is important, and securing more points. I always like to live in the grey with these ones. So I think the one thing you can say is that Delot missing that chance, for example, that's done him in. Because if they win, if they score that goal, the game state's a little bit different, and you may be allowed to sort of get through that game, win that game, move on, and hopefully that's the catalyst. But I wonder if maybe decisions like playing Mazraoui as a 10, and I think he did he was okay there, but you've not won a game in the Europa League yet. Yes, the games have been harder, but again, this is not a sign of progression when you can't get the job done against some of these teams. They are solid teams, I get that. But it has to be better. It had to be better. And it had to be clearer. The decision of how does this team perform? It has to be so much clearer. Last year, we were looking for identity. We weren't seeing it. This year, a similar pattern. Some awful individual mistakes along the way. And I think that is part of this as well. Often with so much data in football now, you can miss some other elements that you just cannot quantify. And I don't feel like that group of players, I think they respect him. I don't think they feel inspired by him. I just don't think that's the case. And because if the player's been great in training, I think Benny McCarthy spoke about this, who's part of the coaching staff. If the training is good and then it's not translating its way onto the pitch, that's just as bad. The bottom line is you've got to win games, and actually you've got to dominate teams as well. And I think with it being West Ham, the way they've started this season, the lack of energy they've had, I think Kudus wasn't on the pitch during that game as well. He was a key player for them. To not be able to kind of blast them away, I think was maybe the final nail in the coffin. I actually thought they'd get a little bit longer than this, because I guess the weird thing now is, well, I guess a decision's been made and it was quite clear, and you wonder, with that international break having taken place, was there a conversation with Ruud van Nistelrooy prior to this? That is absolute speculation on my part. But a lot of people in the YouTube space were doing videos on who should be the next Manchester United manager, because it was a good time to do it, because it looks like he might go, but only if Man United higher-ups have got their ducks in a row and they know what their plan is between now and the end of the season. And essentially, they've taken a chance on Ruud van Nistelrooy. Now, Ruud van Nistelrooy, we're going to do a video talking about how he will set up at Manchester United. So if you aren't subscribed to the channel, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the like button as well. That shows that you want that one, that you're gasping for it, in fact. But Ruud van Nistelrooy plays 4-3-3. Actually got the sack because he wasn't kind of Dutch enough in style at PSV. But there's some players there that and it's never a copy and paste job, but if you can kind of maybe utilize that directness that felt too much for PSV, but over with Manchester United, that directness might be something that some of the player profiles within this team could really, really enjoy, because like JaackMaate, Luuk de Jong had a really, really good time under Van Nistelrooy. And he was, to some, unfortunate to lose his job there. He stepped in here. One thing that might be put out there is the fact that Ruud van Nistelrooy has been alongside Erik Ten Hag. So has he been helping or hindering? You'd hope they'd be helping, but he's part of that message as well. Maybe it's not the final say, but the way that teams work now, it's, you're all working together to try and get the best results. And I'm not doubting for a second that Van Nistelrooy doesn't have integrity and isn't authentic, but he's part of the similar message. I'd love to know how you feel about this one, Man United fans, because him stepping in to a tricky situation, but there's Ole Gunnar Solskjaer parallels there, isn't there? Because I think you would expect a bit of a bounce now, and it's going to be on Ruud van Nistelrooy's personality a little bit. And what might be interesting here is how the press portrays Ruud van Nistelrooy. Do they sort of drag his time as a player where he was a bit selfish? There's been a lot of talk about him in terms of his style of play as a player, which has got absolutely nothing to do with him as a manager. But the message that comes out from him from here in to the end of the season is going to be absolutely huge. He is now interviewing for the Manchester United job, but he's got to do something special here. And even if he gets a great response from this group, you're going to get to the end of the season and it's going to be one where, well, hang on, that happened with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. They didn't really get us to where we wanted to be. Do we need someone who's more clear-cut as the right guy for Manchester United? If you go with Ruud van Nistelrooy, someone who you could have made manager in the summer if you wanted to, if he's that impressive, you could have gone and done that. They didn't do that. They stuck with Erik Ten Hag because they felt and listened to the fan base. This is the final thing I'll say on INEOS. I think it's a huge, huge one, and I want to know how you guys feel about this. And I thought they might give him time. And I thought the reason why they might give him time is because they will be judged on their first full-time managerial decision. What they have done here, in my opinion, is they have kicked the can down the road. They're going to hope for the best this year, and that is a very fortunate place to be when you're Manchester United, because they're absolutely not going to go down. Look, if they get into Europe, then great, wonderful. And then it makes a difficult decision for them to kind of go, well, look, he's kind of done all right. Should we give it to him? But that's the same problem that he had with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Erik Ten Hag. But what it does do, if you've got someone to the end of the season, is if he does okay, you have a long period of time now to go and find the guy. And that guy, or girl, will be the big judgment call for INEOS here. Because they have to get that right. They absolutely have to get that right. And so it's smart from that point of view that they're giving themselves that time. But I think there's going to be a lot more pain for Manchester United between now and the end of the season. And even if it does go well, there's a difficult call to be made for the long-term potential and success of Manchester United, who are, one of the biggest clubs in the world, certainly the biggest club in this country. They have to be alongside those top teams winning games. And that is why Erik Ten Hag has lost his job today. I think it's the right decision, but when was the right decision? That's what I want to know from you guys. Let me know in the comments down below.